So I want to first of all welcome everybody to our first Zoom online class, and thank you for Edwin to do this for us. This is going to be very exciting. I'm going to ask Clifford if he has any comments that he would like to make.
Thank you, Cindy. On behalf of USA Dance Charlottesville, I'd like to welcome everybody here. Looks like so far we're counting around, I think I see 36 participants. So we had no idea what we might expect. That's really good to see. I would anticipate we may get some additional people joining us during the class. I want to say welcome to the regulars that come to our monthly dances. Sorry that we're not meeting in person. I'd also like to say a special welcome to our guests and newcomers, people who are not perhaps regular, people who may not be local to Charlottesville. One of the advantages of this is that we can reach out to friends and families across the country, even across the world. I'd encourage you to think of that if you find this is a useful or enjoyable experience. We do anticipate doing this some more. Other than that, I think the other comment I would make is that we would really welcome feedback, especially from people that we don't know, people who may have some new insight into some ideas, things that we could be doing or could be doing better. I would invite you to send an email to the email address on our webpage. I believe it's usadancecharlottesville, all mushed together, at gmail.com, usadancecharlottesville. Okay, well, without any further ado, I'll turn it back over to Cindy, and enjoy your salsa class, everyone.
Edwin Roa is a professional dancer, performer, and teacher who devotes his career to the study of partner dance. He has a background in ballet and modern and is trained in all three branches, including ballroom, social, and theater arts. Edwin is the founder of ZaborDance and co-founded and directs the Charlottesville Salsa Club, as well as the Dance Spot, which is his studio. His latest endeavor is the Easy Dance Project. And to find out much more detailed information about Edwin and his many accomplishments, please read his full bio. I've posted it into the chat window. It's also posted on our Facebook event and on our website. And you can contact Edwin at zabordance@gmail.com or on his website, which is ZaborDance. That's Z as in zebra, ABORDANCE.com. And the same for the gmail.com address. So I'm going to turn it over to Edwin now, and we are going to start recording.
All right. Well, I hope everybody's doing well, and I apologize for the circumstances of how we're all meeting, but you know, it's a whole new era and no one expected it. We have no clue how long is this going to take, but you know, when God gave us lemons, we do lemonade, right? So one of the things that is important to realize is the benefit of this kind of classes is the fact that we're going to now have to give priority to the technical development of movement more so than the connection itself, unfortunately, for the time being. But it is nonetheless a very important skill, because it's like the saying says, you know, if you want to make someone happy, you got to be happy yourself. So if you want to dance with someone else, you got to make sure that your dancing is up to the game and is able to improve the techniques behind it. Now, this class is intended to be at a beginner level, beginner intermediate. However, I want to give as much information as possible, especially for those of you who I know you guys are far more advanced. There is nothing wrong with exploring the basics, but we can improve it by actually working a little bit in the technical distinctions of the movement. So first thing is I'm going to talk about salsa. What is salsa? Salsa is what it says in the name, is actually a sauce. It's a combination of flavors. So we call it salsa because back in the 1960s, a group, Fania Groups, actually is a record label, decided to market this style of music under one label. Now, this music was actually all varied. There will be guarachas, chachas, rumbas, but there was no type of title, and which encompasses all these all of these type of musical genres. So salsa became the most appropriate name, right? But as its name suggested, pretty much every culture has its own vision or version of how to perform the dance. Now, what is important is to understand the structure of the music. The structure of the music in salsa is a 4/4 tempo. That means that you're going to have 4 beats in one bar of music, right? But every other bar, you're going to have 2 different types of overlapping rhythms. This is called the clave. And so I want to introduce it to you guys. This is the clave. 2 pieces of a stick playing together. Now, this is the African clave. The Cuban clave has 2 sticks just like this one, and it sounds high pitched. The sound is 5 sounds within 8 counts. So in the first bar of music, you're going to hear only 2 sounds on the 2 and the 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. On the second bar of the music, you're going to actually hear 3. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. So this is called the son clave rhythm. So the first 2 bars, so if these are my 4 beats, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, versus the second one goes 1, 2, and 3, 4 in the middle, right? So just so you know, the way we play it, when we call salsa on 1, that 2 happens when you close your beat, your step. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8. 1, 2, 3. So it's when you close the feet. If you decide to interpret it as in New York style, which is salsa on 2, that 2 count is done with an open leg. So I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, right? So it's 2, 3 in step. Now, this is for you guys to pay attention, because most of us, especially those who practice ballroom dancing, they tend to think that mambo is the same as salsa. There is a reason why we have the 2 different names. Mambo rests the hip on the 1 and on the 5. So we move on 2, 3, and 4, and then we move on the 6, 7, and 8. The salsa actually hesitates all the time in the 4th and the 8th. So we move on 1, 2, and 3, 5, 6, and 7. So that you can understand this, I'm going to count it out loud while I'm shifting the tempo. So I want you to notice this. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the 4 and the 8 are hesitating. If I do salsa on 2, it will look like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you notice you're still hesitating the 4 and the 8. If I were to do mambos, it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, whole 5, 6, 7, 8, whole 1. Does that make sense? So it's as detailed as the difference between rumba in the rhythm version versus rumba in the Latin version. In Latin, you use the 2nd beat, 3rd beat, and 4th. In actual rhythm, you use the 1st beat, the 3rd, and the 4th, not the 2nd, right? So that's just for you guys to know. Well, anyway, so enough about the music. Now we're going to talk about movement. And movement is important to realize that actually we have a particular style of motion. There are basically 3 types of formats of shifts of weight. Either one that replaces weight entirely, right, which is called a staccato. That means that my body starts from the top, my body shift, and finish with the bottom. The motivation of my body and movement starts from the torso, and I arrive second. So my leg goes right underneath my body weight on my foot. So that's called a staccato walk. Projected walk is when you send your leg beyond your nose, and then you use the back leg to transfer your weight. So you notice it's delayed. So when you're doing projected walks, it almost looks like you're in a conveyor belt, right? So it's a 50-50 change weight transition. Versus a staccato implies that you're going to transfer your weight almost 90 to 100% on the leg on the first beat. Then you have an elongated walk. An elongation means that you're actually going to extend that projection. So if I start with a projection, I'm now going to lower my base, and now it creates an elongation. It looks as if you're ice skating, which is the case what you do in bolero. In bolero, you elongate, you step, you go into a staccato, into back in place, right? So this is not to say that one type of movement belongs to one style of dance. No, no, no. You use all of these three walks in all of the dances, but certain dances will actually have one more predominant than another. In the case of salsa, the staccato is actually the most favored one, right? There is also along the way a hip motion that we appeal to it. So in a nutshell, you have three schools of hip motions, and they come from the way that the trade of the trade of slaves is actually what gave us a lot of the styles of the dance that we have today. So in Cuba, a lot of the trade was from Spain, Africa to Cuba, and a lot of this movement developed as a figure eight. The French trade developed as a side-by-side, and the Afro-Portuguese developed as a figure of circle, right? This is why sambas and cumbias are done in circles, why salsas, mambos, boleros, chachas, they're all developed as figure eight, or the reason why bachatas and merengues are done by side. Three different types of emotions based out of the trade. Now, for me to be able to make it a little bit more visual, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna place this on my belt buckle so you guys can see it. I don't know, can you guys see the belt buckle? Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna start by moving to the side. We're not changing weight flat. What we do is we move the pelvis and then we change the weight. Does that make sense? So you create that figure eight that we have in order to create that momentum, right? Now, the very base that we're gonna play with, I'm gonna call it the time basic. Time basic refers to the idea of acknowledging the shifts of weight, but not necessarily the traveling, right? So if we have 4 beats to the music, we're gonna use 3 steps in place, but one of them will be hesitated. So I'm gonna do this, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you notice, my hip goes one side, other side, back to the original side, and now hesitate, come back to neutral. Good? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3. So I want you to play it with me. No need to travel, just in place. So I'm going to put this song right here, which is actually a little bit more Can you hear it? Let me point it out. Is that better? That's actually a Colombian rhythm. It's a little bit more high pitched though. So we have like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Right? So I'm actually playing with that action, right? Now, if you notice, it can get really fast. So it is not useful for us to make steps that are projected. The projection of the step is going to consume so much time that you're not going to be able to properly rest your body, and now you will have to force your hips to happen. Hip motion is not a movement from the hip. It's actually a relaxation of the torso, which allows your hip to roll, right? If you move your hip, you're going to start looking like this, right? If instead you allow the body to relax, it's going to soften your movement, right? So I go 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. And if you look at my knees, I'm softening the knee. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, right? Now, the hip is an illusion. The fact of the matter is that I'm not trying to move the upper body. That's my intent. It's not the hip, it's the chest. My chest is going to try to stay in place, although my hips are rotating. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. So now I'm going to start with the first acknowledged basic, that comes from dances like reggae or calypso, which is more French Caribbean descent. And it's actually a side basic. If you happen to have the opportunity to travel to the Caribbean islands, you're gonna see a lot of the islanders move in this fashion. Side, close, side, close, right? So this was acknowledged in salsa and is known as the lateral in Spanish. In English, we know it side by side or lateral too. So we go 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. Good. Now you notice what I'm doing is I'm sustaining my base. So I want you to watch this. If you guys can see this, that little spot on the floor, can you guys see it? Good. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna take my position in place. I'm gonna do 2 of the time basics. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. Now I'm gonna do 2 of lateral. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. Right? Now be careful because I'm not doing 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. I'm actually moving my chest before my hip. Does that make sense? So chest first, hip second, and come back. Chest first, hip second. Good. So we go 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. Right? So that's called lateral. Let's play with the music, and we're going to actually do 2 in place and 2 laterals. Right? So I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to play with a with a cha-cha rhythm, which is slower, but it has a very similar connotation music. So I'm going to play first with it. Now keep in mind, I'm using the music of cha-cha, but I'm actually holding the salsa steps. So this will be something like this. So we have, I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, lateral. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Good, very nice. Good. So in the particular connotation of salsa, as I mentioned before, the name was given to it because there are so many tradition and cultural traditions that were added to this melting pot, right? So if you talk to any Latino, we're going to say salsa is from our country. And it doesn't mean that it's not right. It actually is right. But the fact is it was a melting pot that happened to happen in New York City. Salsa was developed out of the mix of Afro-Cuban music and American jazz music. That hybrid is what created salsa. Mambos are the opposite. Mambos was early. It's the addition of American brass to Afro-Cuban music. So it's the influence of American culture into the Latino culture versus salsa is the opposite. It's the influence of Latino culture into the American one. And salsa started in the 60s, mambo started in the 30s. We're talking about 3 decades earlier, right? So now good to know because a lot of these patterns came from the same reasons. So for example, if you ever hear about Charleston, Charleston was an American dance that actually was interpreted as a forward and back movement. So they do something like this. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. 1 step forward, 1 step back, right? If you take the swivel out, you get the forward, you get the back, which is the same mambo, right? So salsa is a combination of flavors from all other styles of dance. There's nothing new under the sun. What we do is we recycle, right? So here's what happened. Mambo, if you notice the lateral, that was very present in the French Caribbean style of dances. For the Spaniard Caribbean dancers, is actually easier or was more pronounced to go forward and backwards. So you notice how I am. Right now I'm facing you, so you can clearly see a side basic, right? If all I do is rotate my body and I keep the same directionality, you now have a rocking forward and a rocking back. This is your mambo style. It came from a dance called the danzón, which was actually French influence, but from the opposite side of Cuba for the Santiago style. So the Santiago is near Haiti, Havana is near Miami, right? So just so you know a little bit of the geography, right? So from that style came the forward and the back. And because this become very popular out of the mambo music, today we call it the mambo basic, right? But it's referring to the motion, not the music. The music are two different things. Make sense? So this forward and backwards are actually known as mambo basic. If you notice that spot on the floor, you're gonna realize that whether I do lateral or whether I do mambo, I keep my spacing, right? I come back to the same spacing, right? Then from South America, especially Panama, Colombia, Venezuela, there is a rhythm called the cumbia. The cumbia rhythm became extremely popular actually in the early 1900s for South Americans, but it actually has a heartbeat as a bass tone, same as samba. Boom, 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 and boom, 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 and boom, boom, boom. In South America, that motion or that rhythm is reflected as back rock steps. Boom, 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 and boom, 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 and boom, 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 and boom, boom, boom. So most South Americans who actually happen to be living in the 1950s and 60s in New York City actually brought with them that style of motion. At the same time as the Cuban brought this, and the Puerto Ricans, the Dominicans, the Haitians, they actually went the side basics, right? So it all got together, and there you got salsa, right? From the swing music. Now, remember what I said before, salsa is the combination of, or the addition of Afro-Cuban rhythms into the American jazz style, right? One of the very first composers on it was Dizzy Gillespie. There is actually a composition called Manteca, which was actually the song that literally defines what we now, or now is known as Latin jazz. From that came a style called Boogaloo. And the Boogaloo is actually the mother of salsa, if you think of it like that, right? Now, from swing, you have this triple, right? Triple steps, right? Now, it's a syncopated rhythm. Salsa is not. So, but if you take the triple and you do it without the syncopation, it still resembles like a cha-cha, right? If you cross it, creates a grapevine, right? So the grapevine is the initiation of what we call the salsa basic. The salsa basic combined with yet another American style that was popular in 1950s, which was known as the twist, actually created something very interesting and actually made it easy to gel and combine with the other three. Watch the first three basics. 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7. Mambo, 3, 5, 6, 7. Cumbia, 3, 5, 6, 7. What would be the common denominator aside from the timing? The head. The head doesn't move. My head stays in place. 1, 3, 5, 7. 1, 3, 5, 7. 1, 3, 5, 7. Right? If I were to use the swing basic, start moving my head. So it's something like doesn't belong there, right? That's why we started to use the twist. So the twist allows my head to stay in place while I'm doing the same crossings. Does that make sense? Now that's what makes it a little bit harder to explain, but the easiest way, the easiest version, if you notice, when these dance styles started to become very popular, the fashion of the movement, the spacing in which it was developed, like restaurants, like very small confined places, they didn't have the advantage of moving around across the room. So all of the movements were meant to be actually in close embrace. So we have these four basics that define what salsa is: lateral, mambo, cumbia, and salsa, right? So starting with lateral, I'm gonna back you so you guys can follow me. Left foot free, I'm doing 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7. Repeat. 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6. Mambo. Forward with the left and backwards with the right. Forward with the left and backwards with the right. Cumbia. Back with the left, back with the right. You notice my shoulders open up a little bit. It's kind of doing those fifth position breaks in rumba, right? And then salsa is actually going from the side. Walk, cross, step, around. Step, cross, side, kick, step, cross, side, kick, step, cross, side, kick, step, cross, side, kick. Got it? Any questions so far? Nope. All right, so we're going to move on. Here's what I want you to do. I'm going to take the rhythm of the music. We're going to play it with the cha-cha version first. We're going to do 4 basics of each. So it's 4 counts of 8, and then we change the basic. Then we're going to actually move on with another movement. So first part is going to start with this. I'm going to use it with what we call the Boogaloo style basic. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 4, 2, 3. Vamos. 4, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. 4, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. 4, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, now move it out. Go. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. 3, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. 4, 2, 3, solid 5 step. Side, go, side, kick, 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 side, go, side. Got it? Is everybody okay with that? All good? Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Now we understand there's only those four basics that we have. Pretty much the last one, that salsa basic movement, is the only one of the basics that are done in open embrace. That means that we're not holding on to each other, and for obvious reasons, because if you want to decorate with a little kick and you're too close to each other, it may cause an accident, right? So we don't want that to actually happen, right? So of course, the more the merrier we are actually into it. Now, here's going to be a little bit of an amalgamation for us to start playing with this concept. First, when you're doing your side basic, I don't want you to send your leg and nod your head just because I told you to stay in place, right? Now, what I want you to do is initiate with the chest, and then immediately come back to that center. So you notice my leg travels wider than my head. So there is a little bit of a sway, but it's not that much, right? In the case of the ladies particularly decorate by projecting the hip wider than the guys. So for those of you who practice ballroom dancing, is the difference between a side step versus a cucaracha. You guys know what that is, right? So when we call a side step, it means that my whole body shifts weight. This foot is entirely free. When we say cucaracha, it means that you're going to project the leg, but your head does not move. Only the hip moves to the leg and then come back. Can you see the difference? So this is side basic. 1, 2, 3. This is cucaracha. 1, 2, 3. You saw it? Look at the head again. 1 is on top of the leg. 2, 3 versus 1 is in the middle of the leg. 2, 3. Good? And this gives a different flavor. So for the ladies, you're actually doing side basics as cucarachas. 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7. The head remains in place and it looks very like feminine and flowy, right? An easiest way to give you an example, imagine you're holding a whole bunch of groceries in your hands and you want to close the door of your car, right? So you're gonna push the hip out in order to create intentionality. The idea is not to move the upper body to the completion of the step. Make sense? Now, guys, we don't decorate the same way. What we do is the entire opposite. We move with the chest. Now, if you think about the logic behind it, if I'm holding on to my partner's embrace and I want her to create a directionality to it, I have to indicate first the torso, right? If I move from my legs, she feels nothing. So I have to move her torso for her to move into it. That's the reason why the guys actually move the chest before the leg. So we go 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7. And I always joke around because it's almost like if you want to elbow somebody, right? Out, in, out, in. So that gives the exact same structural movement, but now we have difference of intentions of actual character. One is feminine, one is masculine, right? And it's very important not to disregard that, because after all, dancing is a very sensual type of dance. It requires the two roles in order to be balanced out. Make sense? Now, if you're doing a mambo basic, same thing is true. I'm going to move the torso first and then arrive onto the step. So it's the staccato walk. 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7. Unlike ballroom dancing, and because of the speed, we cannot afford to take a straight leg. The straight leg of the movement is too fast, will be too abrupt, and it will be actually damaging for your joints. If it is really fast motion, we tend to bend the knees. For those of you who practice Latin and you're doing jive, you never fully straight. You're actually bending, right? So it's because of the speed, right? Now, if you're doing this, 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7, the head does not travel as much as it did before, right? In the case for the ladies, one of the most common decorations is on your back step. If you're going back, you see my head stays behind. Now, if instead I move it with my leg and I sink afterward, it creates a body wave. 1, 2, 3, which looks far more feminine. So guys, don't do that, just ladies. We go 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. So it gives a different flavor. It's not about the length of the step. It has nothing to do with it. In fact, the tinier, the better. Good? So we have mambo basic, which go front 1, 2, 3, and back 6, 7. Good? Now in the cumbia basic, what we want is to start always from top to bottom. So please, I want you to pay attention to this. Can you see this hand? This hand is going to represent my shoulder, right? What I want you to do is not to send the leg and then the body, right? But instead, send the body and then the leg. Does that make sense? The order is always top to bottom, forward and then out, right? Anytime you want to create something sharp, it's going to have the same propriety. If you're doing something like a crossover break, if you're going to create a position forward, watch the difference. If I go with my leg, it looks rather soft. If I go with my torso, the finishing is far sharper. Make sense? So top to bottom is always more efficient. Good? Now, rule number 1, first identify what does it mean, what do we mean by technique? Technique is the most efficient way of moving. Just keep that in mind, repeat it to yourself. It's the most efficient way to move. So how is it that you know that something is right? Because it's painless, because it's comfortable. If by any chance you feel uncomfortable with the movement, that's your body's way to tell you that you're doing something wrong. So stop, right? And I tell you that because of my own experience. When I was a performer, a lot of the times I was forced to create styles of motions that were alien to my body. And what we end up doing is messing up our bodies. You can always repeat a dance. It's much harder to replace a knee, right? So always pay attention to the way you use your body weight, right? So now we're going to talk about rotation. If everybody's okay with it, now we're going to talk about rotation. One of the most important rotations that you have is actually known as the spot turn. So going back to this little spot right here on the floor, if you guys can see it, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my leg right next to it, right? A spot turn is a rotation that is actually maintain its position. So if I move 1, 2, 3, you notice that right foot never moved. I went front and back. So I came back to that same position. Spot turn means that you're going to keep that same construct in the movement. 1, 2, 3. So if you notice, my right foot never moved. 1, 2, 3. Now, there are many versions of the spot turn. What it refers to is that your pivotal part stays in the same position. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. In international, you're actually doing something like this. This is my spot and that the little dot on the floor is my partner, I'm going outside my partner, around, coming forward and across, right? So the step opens up. So let's say I'm doing the opposite way. 1, 2, 3, right? So I'm going around. That's one version. In salsa, we tend to stay in place. We don't want to travel too much. So we can go 1, 2, and I collect the 3, right? Now, of course, for the purpose of the class, I'm being very technical and I'm coming to a close position. But when you're in a club, like those of you who come to the salsa club with me, you're gonna realize this is not the case. You land somewhere in the vicinity of it, but you don't have to be close, right? And it's because the essence of the dance is not based on your footwork. It's actually based on the way you move your upper body, right? If you go to a party, chances are you're going to observe somebody's body and the way, the fluidity that it has within the music. You don't stare at the legs and say, oh my God, they missed one step. It doesn't matter, right? What matters is the fact that you have that fluid position. So based on that, I'm gonna play an amalgamation that I want you to make sure you repeat it constantly. We start 2 side basic. I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 2, 2, 3, 5, 6, 2 mambos. 1, 2, 3, 5, that's the first one. 2, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. At the end of the second mambo, I'm gonna do a spot turn. 1, 2, 3, right? And now, because of my momentum, 1, 2, 3 is keep going this way. I'm gonna link it into a cumbia. Does that make sense? So I'm not stopping the momentum, I'm just keeping going. My spot turn in this case is rotating to my right. So I'm going right side, which is called natural. Close my feet, keep opening the legs so you go back into a cumbia basic. The cumbia basic becomes kind of recycling the momentum. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do it back in a U. So do 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7, 2, 2, 3, and 5, 6, mambo. 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7, 2, 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3. I think I missed one cumbia. I have one mambo, right? So, and again, we're gonna do 2 of each. So it's 2 side, 2 mambo, 1 turn, and then 2 cumbias. So we have 5, 6, 7, go. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 2, 2, 3, 5, 6, mambo. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 2, 2, 3. Now this spot. 1, 2, 3, cumbia, 5, 6, 7. Cumbia 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7. So that first part of the turn took place of the first half of your cumbia. Does that make sense? Right? So now, once you finish the cumbia, here's what I want you to do. I'm going to purposely overturn it. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, cumbia, 5, 6, 7. Now watch this. 1, 2, 3, 5. I'm going moving sideways. Side, close 7. So now I'm facing 90 degrees to my right side. Make sense? So that 5, 6, 7 changes my position on the room. Good? And then I start again. So we're gonna have to repeat it 4 times in a row for it to come back to the original position. I'm gonna do that again back in you so you guys can follow me. So the first time around, we start facing the computer. The second round will be actually 90 degrees to your right. The third time, you're gonna back the computer. You won't be able to see me. The fourth time, we go this way, and then we come back here. Make sense? So here we go. From the top, 5, 6, 7, and go. 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7. 2, 2, 3, mambo step. 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7. 2, 2, 3. Here we go. Spot 2, 3, and cumbia step. Cumbia step, repeat, and go. Make sense? So the last one, pa, pa, pa. Good? Let's try it again. Side, in a close, in a side, and repeat. Side, in a close, in a mambo step. Front, and close, and back, and repeat. Front, and close, now cumbia step. Turn around in cumbia number 1. Cumbia number 2, in rotation out. So now you're back in the room. Here we go. Side and collect, inside and collect. Side and collect in a mambo, go. front, ankle leg, in back, ankle leg, front, ankle leg. Now ready for the turn. Turn around in a cumbia step, and backside close. Now you're facing 90 degrees to your right. And 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7, 2, 2, 3, mambo step. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 2, 2, 3. Here we go. Spot, turn around, cumbia step, rotation back. And now we start again. Now I'm gonna put it with the music and let's see how it works. So first one is gonna be with the cha-cha tempo. So easy. 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, go. 5, 6, 3, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, go. 7, 3, 5, 7, 5, 6, 7. Here we go. Turn. Right side forward. Side. 3, 5, 6, 7. Side. 3. Mambo go. Turn. 3, 5, 7. 3. Now with the turn. Turn around. Step. Ready, guys. Now face it back. And we go. In a side. Go left. In a side. Go left. Side. Go left. Back to the mambo. Go front. Go left. Back. Go left. Front. Go left. Now start turn. Walk. Turn around. Cumbia step. Cumbia step. And rotation left. Now 1, 3, 5, 7. 1, 3. Back to the mambo. Go front. 3. Back. 7. Front. 3. Now with the turn. Walk around. Cumbia step. Cumbia step. Inside and go. Yes. Yeah. All right. So we're going to now speed it up. We're gonna go with the salsa rhythm. So salsa rhythm is much faster. That means that your steps have to be smaller in order to make it happen. Now, do not worry about decorations in the body right now. Just project the leg if you need to. Eventually, once your body becomes familiar, you can start actually adding those relaxation points. So we're gonna start with this one, which is actually not quite as fast salsa. So and 5, 6, 7, and go. 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 2, 3, 5, 6, mambo. 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 2, 3, turn around. Go 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 2, 3, and turn around. Now side. 5, 6, 7, inside. Now to the mambo, front. 5, 6, 7, in front. Now turn around, walk. Cumbia step, now around, side. Back in the camera, go side. Mambo step, go front. And go front. Now with the turn. Cumbia, and rotation around, go side. Side, back to the mambo, front, back, front. Now with the turn, cumbia, last side, and back, side, mambo, back, and turn, go, back. Yeah. Good. Any questions? No questions at all? Great. So now, for those of you who want to amplify, is there a question? Sorry, I can't hear.
Okay, sorry, let me unmute him. Clifford,
Sure.
there you go.
So what's the question?
So I'm curious if you have a partner. I see Fred and Rita doing it side by side.
Right.
That's one option. Is there another option?
It will be the exact same thing. It's just a different time connotation. So for example, if let's say the leader is going forward on the left, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, that means his turn happens on 1, 5, 6, 7. Now the lady will go forward on 5. So if I do ladies part 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, I shoot the 5th count to make the rotation, and I go the same idea, right? It's just gonna be overlapped. It's not gonna be at the same time. That means she goes first, he goes second. Does that make sense? Or vice versa. I will have to, so watch this. I'm the leader. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. I'm the follower. So I'm going 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Do you see what I did? I went a half a phrase behind in order to match. But the movement is the exact same thing. Exact same thing. So one of the things that is important to recognize is, thank God we only have 2 legs, right? And only 4 directions to go. So the idea behind the dance positions itself is based on the mobility of the body according to the transfer of the weight. So if my body weight is going forward, that's the best ideal situation for me to rotate. So let's say, for example, those of you who are already more advanced, you can start playing with that concept. Ideally, when you go forward, the important part is being able to transfer your weight entirely before you collect. And why am I saying this? If you want to double step, double turn, that becomes the key. Give you an example. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. So now it became a double turn because I was able to manage my access point, right? People are not able to develop those double turns yet because they're in between, they're in transition. And instead of either committing to the foot versus committing to one foot. It doesn't matter which foot you decide to commit to, but you gotta commit. So one of my coaches, which is a phrase that I quote from him all the time, he used to tell me, it's much better to be 100% wrong than 50% right, right? You better commit. So it's the easiest way to actually develop your movement. So being that said, here's what I'm going to propose. This is known as the spot turn. It's when you change your weight 3 times and the axis is sustained in one position. You have another type of turn that is very popular, and it's actually what we use when in advanced movement. It's called the spin. And the spin is a 360 without any change of weight until the very end. So for instance, if I do out of a side basic, 1, 2, 3, right? What you're gonna notice is I'm gonna use the 1 as a prep, the 2 becomes the full rotation. And then I'm going to either transfer in place or move it somewhere else, right? So if I do a spot turn, sometimes a spot turn goes from a switch to a close. But to do a double turn, you have to do from a projection to a spin to a close, and then goes back in place, right? If you notice, what I did is I did not change my entire weight. This is the reason why it's so important for everyone to understand the difference between full steps versus rocking steps or cucarachas, which is actually a transition that is not complete. Does that make sense? So for those of you who go to competition, you're gonna notice many times we'll falter because we don't fully commit to the leg, or because we just made something that was against that regulation that we're judged by, right? Now, in social dancing, I'm only using it for the perspective of mechanics, right? Don't ever try to turn on a flat foot. This is going to hurt you eventually. You might be able to do it for a few times for a month or so, but after that, you're going to suffer knee pains. So the idea, if you watch my head, I want to keep my body weight forward. It's like looking down a balcony. If you look down a balcony, if this is your foot, I want you to imagine that your weight is distributed between the ball of the foot and the first 2 fingers, the first 2 toes, right? Not on the heel. So you're in this leaning position, like the Tower of Pisa. So if you're able to balance that position, you're going to be able to do just about everything, right? So it's funny because a lot of us, including myself, used to be very impressed about how is it that people sustain balance that easy, or it seems easy, right? And it is, the reason is because you get to the point to relax into the foot. And listen to that word, relax into the foot. We tend to go up. So I want you guys to do me a favor. And this is actually for those of you who want to improve your dancing, this is something you got to pay attention to. Can you see these lines? I don't know if you can see it. Can you see these two lines that I just put? Right? Now, I want you to watch this. The concept is my middle point, which is right here. I gotta be able to literally learn to manipulate it. Now you have a straight line from these two all the way to the toe. But you also see that my hips are off. So when I have this alignment going, it's much harder to support than if I were to bring my belt backward in between. Once I do that, this becomes easy to relax because it's like waiting in line. Does that make sense? So if you wait in line, you actually don't use muscles. Remember what I said about what technique is? Technique is the most efficient way to create something. So this is far more efficient because now you're not using any kind of muscle force. All we have to do is now develop the ankle part. So if you're able to elevate the heel and sustain it, that's gonna make it easier. So always transfer your center to the ball, and there is a line that goes from the chest all the way down. Not this way only, right? This is only aligning one side. If you wanna do, like, let's say in Rumba, you wanna do a rotation with your hip, you start first aligning these two, but then quickly you sink. So if you can see those lines, you can see also the texture of the movement. Ba, 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 ba. So the chest moves independently from the hip. This is the reason why we tend to work with the isolation games, right? So always pay attention to those little things because that's really what makes the biggest difference, right? So now, for those of us who want to actually like continue around, here is what I will suggest. Take a side basic. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. On 7, you're collecting your weight. On the second part of the side basic, 1, on 2, you're gonna spin and you're gonna close your 3. And then I can use that position to change my basic. So I can go from a side to a mambo, right? So I'm giving you an example. This is just to upgrade the same exercise we were playing, right? So we have first side basic. Go 1, 2, 3, hold 4, 5, 6, 7, hold. Now on the 7, I'm gonna create my spin. 1, 2, 3, hold 4, 5, 6, 7, hold 8, right? Now I'm gonna go into a mambo. Front, 2, 3, hold 4, back, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7. If you want to double the basic, is what we call it the paddle turn. You point, rotate, close, right? The head doesn't move. So don't change your weight, because that uses too much time. So if you're doing it as a single turn, then it is actually good. 1, 2, 3. But if you want to double it, paddle, hold, and then back, 6, 7, which becomes really important when you're actually trying to get your gains amplified. Now, pay attention to this too. This is actually something that I want everybody to understand. The harder part about dance is your basics. It's only your basics. Because an advanced footwork is nothing more than the decoration of a basic. That's really what it means. It's just we're decorating a basic pattern, which is the reason why we call it the fundamentals, right? Now, when you're trying to play with music, that is what accelerates the next level. So I'm going to play the same exercise we just did without the double turns. Right? Occasionally, you're going to see me adding that spin turn there. You don't have to. You can just keep your basic if it is easier. But we're going to do it with the actual speed, right? So we have this beat right here, which tends to be a little bit faster. So 1. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, and here we go. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. mambo, front, back, front, back, turn, walk around, cumbia, cumbia, and back to the side, so side, 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 mambo, front, back, front, back, now turn, back, back, last time, back again, now facing the computer, mambo, all right, guys. I
Hey,
hope this
Edwin.
actually kind of helps, right?
Yeah. Hey, Edwin, this is Cindy. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, you said you wanted to have a warning. It's 8 o'clock and we started a little bit late. So
Okay.
if you wanted your time for wrap up, that I'm giving
Sure,
your
this is perfect, actually.
okay.
Well, first of all, I want to give you guys a couple of tips that you can do while in the quarantine that you do not need partners for. And you're going to be able to actually improve your technique for when the time comes and we get the chance to share the floor again. Then it's going to be a lot easier for all of us, right? So technique to me is extremely important, but not for the sake of aesthetics. Is for the sake of fundamentals and for the sake of establishing a really healthy habit, right? So one of the most important things that we tend to disregard is our ankles, right? So I will suggest for all of us to practice a very simple exercise, which is extension to the side. And we're going to start by elevating one heel off the floor and transferring the weight to the middle of the body only by pushing off that count, right? Then I'm going to continue pushing off that same leg that I came from until the toe is released. But you notice I have not yet put my heel down. I come down after. So if you counted, it will take 2 counts of 8 to be able to go from one foot to the other. The first count of 8 is only going to get you to the middle. So I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, middle on 8. 1, 2, 3, release the toe, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it teaches you to transfer your full weight. If you're able to sustain your balance, then all your turns are actually going to be a lot easier. Now remember, there is a difference between center versus balance versus alignment, right? You can have, if you understand where your center is, you can balance even if your alignment is off. Does that make sense? So you can create different shapes if you understand those very basic distinctions. So I want you to know that I'm going to be developing a couple of videos out there. It's going to be promoted through my Facebook page, but it's actually going to be all free. And it's about techniques of movement in different styles that you can apply in to ballroom, to club, to whatever it is that you decide to do. Our body is one instrument and we need to tune it in order to make the best out of it. But the style of how you play is entirely subjective, so it's up to you, right? So don't ever believe there is only one technique for things. You have your own technique. Technique is comfort, right? Your body is very unique, so you have to learn to appreciate the center and know how to play with it, right? So I also want to thank you guys first for inviting me to do this class. And I also want to acknowledge Elegant Dancing, which is the room that I'm actually using, is their space in Fairfax. And with them, I'm actually trying to develop different styles. So by the way, starting on next month, every Sunday from 6 to 7, we're going to have a progressive level salsa class. And it's going to start into a beginner intermediate level to a more intermediate advanced level. And it's going to be a progression class. So it's going to utilize all the sequencings on it. So if you guys are interested, just go to Elegant Dance's website and you're going to find out how to register from there. In the meantime, I really thank you so much for being so supportive of our organizations, because me speaking in my behalf for the Salsa Club, this pandemic has actually really affected us all, but it also gave us a good perspective about priorities, right? We we tend to take everything for granted, and perhaps this is the best reminder that we are meant to be social and that we have to actually like work together in unison in order to make our communities happier, healthier, right? So thank you guys so very much for everything. I appreciate it. And please, if you find my work good enough to actually share, please do so. I want to encourage as many people as possible to just dance and have fun, you know? Well, thank you guys.
Thank you, Edwin. Thank you so very much. This was fantastic. And thank you for being our first Zoom class meeting online. Appreciate it. And
very
again,
much appreciate the effort.
yeah, if anybody wants to get in contact with Edwin, again, he has a Gmail account. His email account is ZaborDance@gmail.com. His website is www.zabordance.com, and he also has a Facebook presence. So look him up, and fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, guys. You guys have a fantastic time, and I hope to see you guys soon. Bye.
Bye.